We recently heard the shocking news pertaining to the murder trial of Derek Chauvin, that the friend of George Floyd, who was there in the vehicle with him during this infamous incident, a man named Morries Lester Hall, was all of a sudden refusing to testify. He was supposed to be a key witness for the prosecution. And just before he was set to testify, he said that he would plead the fifth. He did not want to incriminate himself. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to why that would be the case. I thought it may be due to the fact that George Floyd's girlfriend testified that Morries Lester Hall was in fact the drug dealer who was selling opioids to her and to George Floyd. Now, this is just speculation. I give the benefit of the doubt. Someone who pleads the fifth should not be presumed to be guilty just because they're saying, look, I don't want to talk in court because I could get charged myself. Personally, I and probably many other people would still say I'm not testifying because you don't necessarily know what the police are looking for and what they plan to do next. So even to a certain degree at this point, I would say I'll give the benefit of the doubt. But now we have a statement from Morries Lester Hall's attorney stating in simple terms, he will not testify because he could incriminate himself in an upcoming third-degree murder charge because it's already been testified that he was selling drugs to George Floyd. This, my friends, is what I call reasonable doubt. What you need to understand in the trial of Derek Chauvin is that the defense need not prove absolute innocence. They need only prove reasonable doubt based on these statements. And I don't know if the jury can actually take into consideration the fact the guy's saying I plead the fifth, but from an outside perspective as a media personality giving his opinion, to me, I absolutely see reasonable doubt. Second degree and third degree murder for Chauvin would require intent to cause harm. If he was simply doing his job, albeit poorly, I don't think you're going to get him on second or third degree murder. Now, manslaughter, perhaps, but based on this, I still don't think so. Manslaughter would require just gross negligence on the part of Chauvin. And while there have been some pretty powerful statements by the prosecution, again, we need only find reasonable doubt if we end up, in order to end up seeing Chauvin get acquitted. To clarify, I'm not saying he should or shouldn't be. I'm saying we should go where the evidence takes us. While the state is trying to prove that Chauvin was acting with intent, I mean, that's a bold accusation to make, meaning he intended to cause death or bodily harm. At the very least, he was negligent. Well, I think we've seen enough to know that there is real fear Floyd actually died due to drugs. We've heard about the claim from the doctor. Hypoxia was the cause of death for George Floyd, and it very well could have come from methamphetamine or from fentanyl, which was found in George Floyd's system. We're now hearing a bit more from the defense. In several photos, stills from a body camera that's up close next to Derek Chauvin, you can see that Chauvin's knee is in fact on George Floyd's shoulder blades, not his neck. The prosecution countered saying, well, in this other photo, it does look like his knee is on the neck. Again, the prosecution is trying to prove that Chauvin did something, but already we've seen multiple instances now. In the event where the defense said, they asked one of the key witnesses, does it look like the knee is on the shoulder? Yes. When asked, are the police trained to put the knee on the neck? Yes. Now, this is where things get interesting. The media is showing only one narrative for the most part. Why? Because they're biased. They tend to show you that the prosecution is, well, they're getting some points here, saying that Chauvin was in violation of policy, that the amount of time he spent on George Floyd in any capacity was too long, and those are important. But it's strange to me that we need to be talking about reasonable doubt in this instance. And the media just keeps trying to make it seem like Chauvin is going to be found guilty. They keep telling you all of the things the prosecution has said. There's a big difference between the police department saying that's not policy and the defense saying, doesn't it seem doubtful? That's where everything changes. Now, I worry if they keep telling people all of this news about what the prosecution is earning points on and ignores what the defense is earning points on, people will have an expectation that George Floyd will, in their view, have justice and see Derek Chauvin go to prison. They have now, one activist even said that all hell will break loose unless they get what they want and Chauvin is sentenced. The media is setting up a dangerous expectation. So let's read the news. Before we get started, head over to Timcast.com and become a member in order to get access to exclusive members-only segments from the Timcast IRL podcast. We set this up because the purge is real. People are getting banned. And in the event that we get banned, I will still have content somewhere where you can go and get it. By becoming a member at Timcast.com, you're helping to support the work that I'm doing, and we got a bunch of really amazing stuff coming up. We may be just about to sign a deal to fund a comedy entertainment show. That's right, building culture, and it's all thanks to you who are members at Timcast.com. So become a member, but don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Let's read the story from the Daily Mail. George Floyd's friend, accused of giving him the fake $20 note and feeding his opiate addiction, refuses to testify because he could incriminate himself in drug dealing and potential third-degree murder charges. That is in quotes. The Daily Mail reports. Morries Lester Hall, who was in the car along with Floyd the day of his death and is accused of giving him the alleged fake $20 note police were called over, appeared in court via video link to hear the court's decision on whether or not to grant his motion to quash the subpoena calling for him to give testimony. Morries Lester Hall, 42, had last week filed a shock notice with Hennepin County District Court stating his intention to plead the fifth should he be called to testify by either side. His bid to avoid testifying was filed the night before Floyd's girlfriend, Courtney Ross, took the stand and told jurors that she and Floyd had bought opioids and drugs believed to be speedballs, a mix of methamphetamine and fentanyl from Hall. According to Ross, on one occasion, when she took the pills believed to be bought from Hall, she felt like she was going to die. Ross also revealed that Floyd has been hospitalized twice in March, on one occasion due to a drug overdose that saw him hospitalized for 5 days. On Tuesday, Hall appeared via media link from Hennepin County Public Safety Facility, where he has been held since his arrest on March 16th, on charges of violating a no-contact order, domestic assault by strangulation, and another felony warrant. His bail was set at $10,000. Hall had requested to be allowed to wear civilian clothes rather than jail scrubs during an appearance, and appeared in a suit Tuesday. Judge Peter Cahill told Chauvin's defense team to drop a list of questions they would like to ask Hall by Thursday, when he will make a final decision on the matter. Former Minneapolis police officer Chauvin, 45, is charged with murder and manslaughter after being accused of pinning his knee on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds last May 25th. He has pleaded not guilty, arguing that he only did what he was trained to do in his 19 years as a cop. And we can see this is the video of Morries Lester Hall. He appeared on video link in this photo. They say, the legal document filed by Hennepin County Public Defender last week states, quote, Mr. Morries Lester Hall hereby provides notice to all parties in this matter that if called to testify, he will invoke his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. This morning, his attorney, Adrian Cousins, stated that with no immunity or protection, he risked incriminating himself in a future third-degree murder investigation for any matters relating to controlled substances consumed by Floyd and potentially provided by Hall. The Daily Mail states, in Minnesota law, third-degree murder charges can be brought against someone directly or indirectly involved in providing, selling, or bartering controlled substances to a person who subsequently succumbs to their consumption. This is what I was speculating. When Courtney Ross, the girlfriend of George Floyd, stated that Morries Lester Hall had provided them the drugs, it seemed obvious to me that he was scared. The judge brought murder 3 back on the table. For those that aren't familiar, Derek Chauvin was charged with second-degree murder and I believe manslaughter. The third-degree murder charge was, I guess, removed. There was a point in the trial where the judge allowed third degree to be brought back to the table. This was interesting because many people felt that second-degree murder would not stick. Second-degree murder is when you intend to kill somebody. It's called, many call it passion murder. This is my understanding. I could be getting it wrong. I did go over the charges. First-degree murder is premeditation. Second-degree murder is intent to kill without premeditation. Third degree is intent to cause bodily harm that results in death. Manslaughter is negligent actions that result in someone's death. In this instance, bringing back murder 3 may have scared Morries Lester Hall because, well, murder 3 also includes, as they note, providing someone with a controlled substance and then they die. With the testimony now under oath from Courtney Ross that she said this guy's effectively their dealer, it stands to reason he knows he could be getting in trouble over this. But now, outside of any speculation, we have the official statement from his lawyer that this is what he fears. I stated earlier, I don't know if the jury is allowed to take this into consideration, but as far as I can tell, I don't see a strong enough case. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a criminal justice expert or anything like that. but it really does seem like you could convince a reasonable person that Derek Chauvin may be a bad cop, like in terms of not being good at his job, not like evil or anything. Like he could just be not good at his job. But whether or not he acted negligently is an entirely different story. I mean, you have a guy who may have been in the middle of a drug deal with a guy who's now saying he thinks he might get charged with murder, and so he doesn't want to testify. Sounds to me like Derek Chauvin wasn't the supervillain, but it may be more of a banality of evil situation. I stated on Twitter that I'm sad for George Floyd. I'm sad the man lost his life. I don't think that we should be imprisoning people who have addictions. We should be helping them. And I don't like the cops who blindly enforce these laws. We need to end the war on drugs. Right. Some people pointed out then, well, it's not Chauvin's fault. Well, hold on. Within reason. I get it. That's why I say it's more of a banality of evil. It's not that Chauvin had a depraved mind or wanted to cause harm or kill somebody. It's that he's part of a system that says just do these things. And he did. And someone lost their life, which is why I say the state is at fault. The war on drugs is at fault. Now, I get it. Chauvin wasn't, he arrived later, and George Floyd wasn't being stopped over drugs. He was being stopped over a counterfeit bill. Regardless of the drugs, this still may have happened in some capacity. But George Floyd appears to have, at least it looked like, and according to a statement from the judge, ingested a large quantity of drugs once the police arrived. So it's a complicated situation. In the end, I think we may see some pretty severe mass rioting. They're going to say, Hall's lawyer cousin said, I cannot envision any topics that Mr. Hall would be called to testify upon that would be relevant to the case that would not incriminate him. And whoa, right there from Hall's own lawyer. I cannot envision any topics that Mr. Hall would be called to testify upon that would not be relevant to the case that would not incriminate him. That's amazing. I mean, that's a very, very serious statement. Nothing? How many cops did you see? It would all be incriminating. You have a right against self-incrimination. So I don't want to hold this against Morries Lester Hall, but outside of the court of law, we are allowed to have our opinions, and well, that's mine. Hall, like Floyd, is a Houston native, and the two men connected with each other in Minneapolis through a pastor. According to an interview with the New York Times, he and Floyd had been in touch every day since 2016, and he considered the older man a confidant and mentor. In the same interview, Hall himself boasted, I'm a key witness to the cops murdering George Floyd, and they want to know my side. Whatever I've been through, it's all over with now. It's not about me. Yet despite his claims, Hall was far from cooperative at the outset of the investigation into Floyd's death. Agents of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension attempted to contact Mr. Hall numerous times to no avail, and he initially provided police with a false name at the scene of Floyd's arrest. Chauvin is standing trial on 3 counts, second and third degree murder and second degree manslaughter. If convicted on the most serious count, he could face up to 40 years in prison. Lesser charges could have him free in as little as 5 years. Hall was next to Floyd in the blue Mercedes SUV when Cup Food staff tried to get Floyd to return the cigarettes he had just purchased using a fake $20 bill, or allegedly a fake $20 bill, or come back and pay with a genuine one. He was next to Floyd when officers Lane and Kung arrived at the scene, and he was next to him when Lane pulled his weapon and instructed him to get out of the car. In numerous clips, Hall can be seen interacting with both officers on the sidewalk. During testimony last week, jurors heard Cup Foods clerk Christopher Martin explain that one of the reasons he knew the $20 bill with which Floyd tried to pay was fake was because of its blue pigment. He went on to reveal that his suspicions were also roused because the note was so similar to one Hall had attempted to pass off as a real earlier that same day, and which the clerk had refused to accept. It sounds like to me that Morries Lester Hall had a counterfeit bill, tried to use it, didn't work, went to Floyd, said, you try it, I just tried it. Floyd tried it and it worked, and then they refused to cooperate. But now I want to show you how the media is playing this. And I want to show you, look, there's reason to think Chauvin could get convicted. Absolutely. I don't know how the jury will view all of this. But I also think it's very likely that Chauvin is acquitted. So he may get convicted. He may also get acquitted. I'm leaning towards acquittal for several reasons. As I mentioned, probably 50 billion times at this point, reasonable doubt. But let me show you how the media is reporting things. This is Haley Miller. Now, Haley Miller is doing a pretty good job reporting on this, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. She's a reporter with Huffington Post. But I just want to talk to you about framing and bias. For the most part, I've been following this reporter's Twitter threads on the trial of Derek Chauvin because she does a pretty good job But there are framing issues that I think are relevant. What the reporter chooses to highlight does have an impact. And that's true for me as well. I try to make sure you're getting an honest view of things, but even I have my bias. In this instance, I think there's good arguments made from both sides. But because the burden is on the state, it's a net positive for the defense. Haley Miller says, Nelson, who is the defense, shows Mercil a pic of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. Nelson says Mercil said it wasn't an MPD-trained neck restraint, but perhaps part of a different training. Mercil says kneeling across the neck could be part of training on how to use body weight to control a suspect. Quote, however, I will add that we tell officers to stay away from the neck when possible, Mercil testifies. Nelson shows a photo from, quote, ground control training. Quote, we caution officers to be mindful of the neck area and look to the shoulder for placement, Mercil says. In an image provided by the defense, you can see an officer placing his knee on the neck of a suspect. Miller goes on with another tweet. Mercil testifies that Chauvin's knee in this image appears to be in Floyd's shoulder blades. Asked if this image shows a neck restraint, Mercil says no. Asked if it shows a prone hold that an officer may apply with his knee, Mercil says yes. Nelson asks if he's trained officers to use their body weight to continue holding a person until EMS arrives. Mercil says yes. As long as needed to control them, yes. Now, I think there's some interesting framing. Again, Miller doing a pretty good job. Let's take a look at someone, say, Jack Posobiec, in what they will highlight. Jack Posobiec tweets, breaking. Sergeant who is trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and trains officers in those tactics testifying. Defense asks, officers are trained to put a knee in the shoulder blade to the base of the neck. Answers, yes, for ground control. Jack then goes on to say, prone control technique to maintain control of a subject by using body weight over the subject. It's a more direct statement presented by Jack Posobiec. I'm not saying this to disparage either Jack or Haley, but to point out there will be gaps in the perspective of some of the reporting you get. I think Jax takes a position that will show you there's grounds for reasonable doubt on the part of Derek Chauvin. That you have a sergeant who trains these tactics straight up saying a knee in the shoulder blade to the base of the neck. Yes, they're trained to do it. So what do we then see? Well, as we already learned from Miller, they asked if the officer was looking at one image, the defense showed an image. Is this knee in the shoulder blade? Yes. Could it have been that Derek Chauvin was trained to put the knee from the shoulder blade to the neck and was just not that good at it? People assume that every single one of these cops is going to be a marksman. They're going to pull out their gun and be able to hit every target perfectly like in the movies. It's not true. Their aim is bad, typically. We learn about what happens in New York when the cops tried shooting at one suspect and they missed and hit 7 bystanders, something crazy like that. So Chauvin is shown a slide. Here's how you do it. Are we to assume he's going to be proficient at it from one training course or from even a few? No. Someone who's going to be doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or ground control tactics, and they're going to be good at it, they've probably been doing it for a very long time. For your run-of-the-mill cop, all they know is I saw this thing in a PowerPoint where they told me this is what I'm supposed to do. If he did it wrong, well, is it intent is it negligence? I don't think so. Which is why this says to me that even manslaughter may be off the table. Now, check this out. Sean Dilley, this is a correspondent for the BBC News, says, at the Chauvin trial, Sergeant Mercil asked if he can see the placement of Chauvin's head. Yes. Another photo, 1046. You can see Mr. Chauvin's knee between the shoulder blade of Mr. Floyd. Yes, sir. Then he then asks, does this appear to be a neck restraint? No, sir. These are very important things the media is highlighting. But when they're having to choose what their headline is going to be, they're typically going to go for the confirmation bias that will get them the most clicks. Defending Derek Chauvin likely won't do that. So they'll say, the cop said Chauvin bad. But there's more. Xavier Walton, a reporter with KHOU, tweets, Eric Nelson, referencing still images from Minneapolis PD body cam showing Chauvin knee placement on the shoulder blade of George Floyd as opposed to Floyd's neck. This is a reporter outright saying, no, the video shows the knee is on the shoulder blade. My friends, it's not so clear cut. Many activists have said, we have seen the video of a cop killing George Floyd. That is not true. We've seen a video of a cop with his knee positioned on the back or neck of George Floyd. Most of us jumped to conclusions. It's what people do. The point of a trial and a legitimate defense is that we now go through the available evidence to determine if Derek Chauvin actually had the intent to murder, the intent to cause harm, or was negligent. There's still a question about the time Derek Chauvin kneeling on the back of kneeling on George Floyd, be it the neck or the shoulder blades, for 9 minutes and 29 seconds could be deemed excessive. That will be up for the jury to decide. But many people in the media, they'll give you a framed view of things, myself included, as I noted. Katie S. Fang says, on cross-examination of Chief Arredondo, so this is from yesterday, Chauvin's defense counsel got him to agree that one of the body camera videos appeared to show that Chauvin's knee was on George Floyd's shoulder blade, not just his neck. Katie then says the prosecution on redirect made it clear that the other videos show Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck and that Chauvin moved his knee once the paramedics arrived. That doesn't change anything. If we're hearing that there is a ground control technique that requires them to have the knee on the base of the neck or the shoulder blades, how do you even prove negligence? Do they train them on how long they're supposed to have their knee there? It doesn't seem all that likely. Look, I'm not convinced that these trainings are going to be good. You know what I mean? They'll tell the cops, here's what you do, and that's probably it. When we take a look over to The Guardian, this is what you'll see. Derek Chauvin trial. Police trainer says restraint used on Floyd not authorized. But to me, this probably isn't good enough. Again, not a lawyer, not involved in the trial. But the police saying it's not authorized doesn't change whether or not they actually said this is a legitimate technique and we do train on it. If they train someone to use a technique and then later say it's not authorized, don't they still have some responsibility? If they change the rules, don't they still have some responsibility? The question then is, did they provide notice to Derek Chauvin that the training that they've actually given for ground control techniques is no longer authorized or was never authorized? It seems like what we're looking at is the police department saying, we this is not allowed. We have no responsibility here. The challenge? Well, as I've stated, reasonable doubt. The police department can say everything that they want to say, but the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Chauvin intended to cause murder, harm, or was negligent. If this is a run-of-the-mill, derpy cop who is just told like, oh yeah, you got to put your knee here. And he's like, okay. And then he doesn't know what he's doing. Was it a depraved state of mind, or was he just like, I don't know, that's what I'm supposed to do? This is what the left doesn't seem to understand, that when you're trying to imprison someone, there's a strong requirement that we know this individual did something wrong. Now we have this tweet from Omar Jimenez. He says, worth noting, we've now had multiple senior level officers from within the Minneapolis Police Department testify in one way or another that Derek Chauvin's actions do not line up with what they believe should have happened. That now includes the chief of police. I want to make sure I'm highlighting that the police are coming out against Chauvin saying he did things wrong. This is absolutely reason to believe that Chauvin is responsible, at the very least, for manslaughter. I don't think the state at this point has any possible way of proving murder. I really don't. So here's what might happen. We have this article from WBNG. Police official. Chauvin was trained to diffuse situations. They say that he was trained to de-escalate when things got too excited. Well, if Derek Chauvin gets convicted of manslaughter, which I'm kind of leaning against, but is entirely possible. I'm not a psychic, okay? Well, there'll be riots. I don't see how he can get charged with murder. It's entirely possible that I don't see how he can get convicted of murder. It's entirely possible he does. But we know it's coming. BLM activist Maya Eccles warns all hell will break loose if Derek Chauvin is not given the maximum sentence. They say Eccles is hardly the only Black Lives Matter activist who has supported the destruction of cities after Ashley Grant said last year that she didn't care if the whole city burned down. Maya Eccles' internet presence is booming as she dons many hats. TikToker, model, Black Lives Matter activist. Recently, however, Eccles made headlines when a TikTok video she posted saw her warning her audience about the consequences of former Minneapolis cop Derek Chauvin not getting the maximum sentence for the death of George Floyd. I don't know if she said maximum sentence, but, quote, she said, if George Floyd's murderer is not sentenced, just know that all hell is going to break loose, Echo said in a since deleted TikTok video. Don't be surprised when buildings are on fire, just saying. She's right, though. She's absolutely right. I don't think she should have deleted the post because I don't think it's incitement. I think it's an obvious point we've all made, and even I've made. She is correct. It's not about her. It's about people in general. They're being fed this line from the media over and over again. These headlines. Chauvin was trained to de-escalate, to defuse. Chauvin, the police say, who was not authorized to do this. The defense counters. Here's a photo saying do it. Here's someone saying do it. Here's a doctor saying fentanyl causes hypoxia. Here's all of these instances where the defense has presented reasonable doubt. And the media doesn't run with these. Those are secondary to the damning headline against Chauvin. People have already made up their minds. The court of public opinion says he did it. The leftists are saying, we don't need a trial. We saw the video. But in court, there's a bigger burden. Look, it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer. And that means there's a high burden for the state. But now everyone expects Chauvin to be convicted because we all know he did it. So they say. But we don't. We know that acting as a police officer, he restrained George Floyd. We know that in that capacity, in some instance, somehow George Floyd lost his life. And we're now being told by the left that we don't need a trial because of it. But in the trial, we're learning there's reasons to believe that Chauvin was trained to do this, whether improperly or otherwise, that he wasn't acting with malintent, malice, or reckless disregard, or a depraved mind. In fact, I should say, I don't believe the state has proven it. I really don't. I think they've just given us reason to consider it. Look, it's really hard to read someone's mind and know what their true intent was. If George Floyd is saying, I can't breathe, before he's even been restrained, if the judge even acknowledges that George Floyd appeared to have put something in his mouth while he was in the car, if the tox screen showed a lethal dose of two different drugs, fentanyl and methamphetamine combined, then if George Floyd resists, kicks his way out of the car and says, put me on the ground, put me on the ground, put me on the ground, as we saw from the body camera footage, you show all of that to a jury and then have the cops coming out and saying Derek Chauvin did something wrong. And it's like, yeah, but like using an improper training technique is not negligence. Holding someone down is not negligence. The murder thing to me is out the window. But think about this. You want to say he was negligent. Negligent, in my opinion, would be like if he was explicitly told, do not do this. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. If they said, we banned the neck restraint, it would even be an argument if they were like, we never told him to do this, and he did it anyway. It's not even that. It's that they quite literally said he was trained to do it, that it was a violation of policy, that it wasn't in line with their expectations, that he was trained to defuse the situation. But yes, they are trained to use the ground control technique. How do you even convict someone of negligence, manslaughter, if that's the case? Which brings me back to the original story. How do you convict a man of any of these charges when the other man who was there says he fears conviction on third-degree murder in the future if he testifies because he would incriminate himself? Again, he has a Fifth Amendment right. I don't want to hold it against him. The court should not. But I can as an individual. I understand and respect the Fifth Amendment, and I try to remain true to the core of that principle to the best of my ability. But I have to recognize the statements made as they are. In terms of whether or not he should go to prison, if the state can't make their case against Morries Lester Hall because they don't have his statements, then he should not go to prison. But if he's telling me he thinks he might get charged for, being responsible for the death of George Floyd, I'm like, dude, like you seriously opened the door for Chauvin to get acquitted. You know that, right? I'll tell you this. No matter what happens, I think the riots are coming. Derek Chauvin might get convicted of manslaughter. The murder seems just outrageous at this point. I just really don't see that happening. He's a cop. He's expected to do certain things. He's told to do certain things. He's told to use physical force on people. How can you convict him of murder if he's part of his job is using force against people? Second degree would mean he wanted George Floyd dead. That's absurd. Like, how do you prove that? Third degree would mean he was trying to hurt George Floyd, but he's a cop who's told to use force against people. Manslaughter would be negligence. I'm not seeing it, man. I am really not. So I'll tell you what I am seeing. I'm seeing riots. Here's AZ Central. Will America riot once the Derek Chauvin trial ends? If it's responsible to consider the potential for riots at the end of the Derek Chauvin trial, but only if the same questions are asked for both sides. The right isn't going to riot if Chauvin is convicted. conservatives were outraged along with the left. But many conservatives are now approaching the evidence to the best of their ability, objectively. When I see the media report, police say Chauvin was not authorized to do this. Yeah, we already are biased against Chauvin. So we need to see what the defense is saying to better understand if Chauvin has a chance at getting acquitted. The media is less inclined to show that narrative, in which case riots are coming, my friends. Can we expect riots? Yes. In my opinion, no matter what. We'll see. It may not be the worst thing in the world. It may not be the same as the George Floyd riots when they first started. I don't know. It may be worse. We are in hyperpolarized times. And the issue, I think, is that if George Floyd, if Derek Chauvin is not convicted, then Democrats will absolutely see an opportunity to raise money. And that means they got to rile people up. And that means cities will burn and people will suffer. And that's a scary prospect, isn't it? The Democrats know that this is an opportunity to make a ton of money. And they're probably, I think many of them are looking forward to Chauvin getting acquitted because then they have a cause. Then they can say, oh no, look, you need our help. We have to fight for you. Give us money, quick, please. That's what scares me. And I think innocent people will suffer in the end. When people riot, it in no way affects the rich negatively. They don't care. Building burns down, they get insurance to the best of their abilities, to their best of their resources. They'll be able to cover the cost of this damage. Not completely. However, when the city burns and the property value collapses, rich people can come in and buy up property for pennies on the dollar. It benefits them in the long run. That's what I think will happen. And it'll just hurt everybody. I guess we'll see as this case continues. So stick around. Next segment's coming up tonight at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. It will be live at 8 p.m. and we'll take your comments live on the show. So come hang out and we'll see you all then.